Hello, it's very good to see you, and thank you for being here. Mike, Peterloo, your most recent film, it struck me seeing it again after a bit of a gap, that it's actually, it's not just the content, it's not just about being about radicalism and about the politics of it. The film itself is pretty radical in a particular kind of way, which is the process of becoming politicized, the speeches, the need to listen to the arguments as in the way that they were heard by Joseph's family and all the people in the film. That was obviously very important to you.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it seemed natural and inevitable, really. That has to be what it's about. It's an interesting question because the issue that question is about manifests itself on a number of different levels. It is absolutely about that in terms of the politicization and the people's consciousness of the issues. But on another completely different level, I suppose I would have to say that it manifests itself in what the film is asking you, the audience, to do. I mean, to explain that in a crude way, of course, in some quarters, the film had a negative reaction because people said, "Oh God, it's just all talking, just all speeches. It's long, it's long-winded and it's tedious and all that." And if you start from that perspective and you want it to be quick bites, and I mean, it falls down very easily, quite quickly.
Yes,
yeah. But so I mean. In the investigation of the whole history and the issues and things, it simply, to me, became inevitable that we had to sort of really deal with many things and without compromise. Because you, the audience, are also must be subjected to, or entitled to, that was a more appropriate way of putting it, to what the people in the experience and I think that is, as I understand it from the research that we did, which was, of course, colossal. That is what happened, and of course, what the film, what the main political issue is about, resonates down to us, because it's it is about the franchise. It's a fact 2% of the population at that time had the vote, you see, I mean, to leap to the other end of the issue, of course, I think that the situation here should be that there is what we have in Australia, which is compulsory voting. And obviously we know that, not least because of what we're enduring even as we speak, that there should be proportional representation. So all of those things inevitably are all bound up with looking at these events that happened only the day before yesterday, really, and still have resonance. I mean, apart from anything else, what is interesting just historically is that, because one of the decisions I made was that at the end of the film, not to have any long list of stuff telling you what happened and when they did get the vote and all the rest of it. Because I think that would, because the film takes you to, it ends in it carries you to a place, an emotional place. And I think it will dissipate that if you got, because, you know, if you want to, my instinct, my feelings were and are that if you want to know anything about it, you can Google it, basically. But it's, the fact of the matter is that the Peterloo Massacre was in 1819, and the last bit of franchise was that all women got the vote in 1927, you know, and it took all that length of time for everyone to be enfranchised. So it resonates with us, and just...
Yeah, I mean, just to pick at random, something that felt as though it could have been written yesterday was John Bagley, one of the three firebrands, in the speech, one of his speeches, in his speech in the field, just after habeas corpus has been rescinded, he talks about when the representatives of the people their interests are at odds with the interests of the people, then the nation is headed for destruction.
There you go.
You can't help but feel.
No, it somehow rings a bell.
It does, doesn't it? So, yes, as you say, yesterday, really.
Yeah.
At what point did you think I've got to do this now, given that the bicentenary will be coming up?
Well, that was part of it. I mean, there had never been a proper film about it. There have been some small little television things that dealt with aspects of it, but there hasn't been a real thing that looked at it. And the bicentenary was coming up, and it just seemed a very natural thing to do. I mean, on a personal level, I grew up in North Salford in Manchester, and you could get to where it happened, where St Peter's Field was originally, from our house on the bus in 15, 20 minutes at the most. You could walk it, basically. Like a lot of people from the Northwest who worked on the film, I hardly knew about it growing up, about the Peterloo Massacre. We did, for O-level history, we did spend half a paragraph doing it and the Cato Street conspiracy, if anyone knows what that was, which happened just shortly after that. Yeah. But like, you know, it was never, for us, a lot of us, certainly my generation, you really didn't know anything about it. And it's extraordinary. I mean, at primary school, they could have taken us on the bus down there, walked us round the area, told us all about it, and had us back in school by lunchtime because it was only down the road, you know. So gradually, both as a citizen with a sense of history and politics and a Mancunian, I gradually started to find out about it. And then, of course, what you do, you realise this is a big deal. And it was an enormous deal.
And did you find out about it? I'm just wondered about this. Did you find out about it in the context of, for example, the history of trade unionism, the history of the franchise, rather than in the Manchester context?
Oh, yeah.
So that was the frame of finding out about it.
Yes, absolutely, of course. Yeah.
Because it was, I suppose, it does have that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what gets into education. I mean, like we all learnt about the Tolpuddle martyrs more than you did about the Peterloo Massacre. You know, it's all that. You know, anyway. You know.
And am I right in thinking that until Jacqueline Riding, who did the research for the film, wrote her book. There was just one.
Oh, no, that's wrong. There are a lot of books about it. No.
About it as a single issue.
Oh, yeah, no, there are lots of books about Peterloo Massacre. No, lots, actually. No, that's not true.
So there's no shortage of...
No, not at all. No.
And on the topic of research, one of the brickbats that you got was about the magistrates and about how they appear to be... a caricature in some kind of way, but they're absolutely based on the reality.
Not only are they, but the ones that the three that you see actually doling out ridiculous and disproportionate punishments. Those magistrates, those were actual portraits of actual magistrates, and those actual cases were the actual cases verbatim, because we had a huge amount of help from the National Archive and the British Library too, and those were the actual cases, including the punishments. I mean, we didn't make those up, basically. No, I mean, but you don't have to, with respects to things that have gone on and things that are going on as we speak in the Ukraine. You don't have to go far to see how beastly people are when they are being beastly, and it was very important to the authorities to put down this preposterous notion that people should have that ordinary working people should have the vote or the franchise. It's as simple as that.
Yes, and the scene where the magistrates are, the four of them around the table working out what they're going to do, and they need evidence and all this kind of thing, and the minute differences in their position, but it's essentially bash them and give them the whip and put them in their place, which is kind of
it is and
the class attitude of the time. There's a very interesting figure, the military man Bing, who's put in charge right at the beginning of the film of the area, that part of on the other side of the Pennines, from the one he knows, Lancashire. He's a really interesting figure, abdicating his responsibility on the day to go and race his horse. How did he just?
That's what happened. That's what happened. He went. He really did go to the races at York on that day. He I mean, you don't have to be particularly perceptive to suppose that he knew what was going to happen, basically.
And another two figures that I think are fascinating are Sidmouth and Hobhouse, the Home Secretary, and his number two, who are brilliantly played. Did you raid Hansard and Home Office files for things that they said?
Absolutely. No, I mean it all comes out of the research. They're portraits of these guys, including Home Secretary did have a stammer. We haven't made that up. It's all that. Here's the thing about this particular kind of operation. Once you start to investigate it, it's there to be to be plumbed. I mean, that isn't to say that, of course, there are inventions in not least the central family, which I mean, the idea of the lad whom we first meet on the field of the Battle of Waterloo, then meeting his end at the Peterloo Massacre. I mean, there were about 14 veterans of Waterloo who met their end at Peterloo. Certainly, we're at Peterloo, and there was one particular guy called John Leigh, who was the subject of an elaborate magistrate investigation by magistrates at Oldham after the Peterloo Massacre as to why he had died and been killed, and the authorities abandoned the investigation after a time when they saw which way it was going, basically. There was actually a Granada dramatisation of that, which is just interesting to see as an aside to this, at some stage. But so the idea of this lad who finally meets his end came from some things that actually happened, although we've invented him and that family, of course. Yeah.
I just want to move on for my little questions about the aspects of the filming and the challenges therein. There's a substantial amount of CGI in the film, more than in Mr. Turner, which was very localised, because basically you had to recreate 1819 Manchester. How was that?
Well, I mean, we first the main problem was where the hell to film. The centre of Manchester, the St. Peter's Field in Manchester, with complete freedom to do it, you know, and all kinds of the centres of all kinds of towns were rejected because, you know, you basically, well, yes, you can film, but not on market day and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, so eventually one thing was absolutely clear from very early on is that whatever else happened, we weren't going to film it in Manchester, you know. And if anyone who knows Manchester, I mean, St. Peter's Square, which is right in the middle of town, St. Peter's Field is really where the old Free Trade Hall is on Peter Street, and then there are coffee bars and nice restaurants and things right in the middle. In fact, the people were hauled into the Friends Meeting House during the massacre itself. St. Peter's Field was a sort of large open piece of land in town. But people were hauled into the Friends Meeting House, and that wall of the Friends Meeting House is still there. In fact, there is talk of making that a memorial to the Peterloo Massacre, but whether that's going to happen or not, I don't know. But anyway, we weren't going to do it there. So, to cut a long story short, we finally... So I've got a mental blank as to where we did actually film it.
Woolwich.
No.
Tilbury.
Tilbury, thank
That's
you.
it. I knew it was on the Thames.
This is what a senior moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Tilbury.
Tilbury Fort, which was built by Henry VIII and is down on the estuary in Kent, is a very forbidding and bleak place. Well, we were able to take it over with, I don't want to be rude about English heritage, but they weren't very helpful, but we did take it over. And we built the houses on one side, and the house where the magistrates are is an actual house. But of course it's, you know, in any direction you look, there's just sky and space all around. So what the CGI, to answer your question, what the CGI guys did in post-production, brilliant guys, who of course have learnt their skills by working on big Hollywood productions. These are guys in London, in Soho. They went back to the plans and elevations and maps of Manchester in 1819, and they built a virtual model of Manchester, so that in any direction you looked, you'd see the right buildings. It was magic, really. Plus, of course, the fact that there were 600,000 people at the Peterloo Massacre, and we had 200 extras. So there was a lot of classical crowd replication, which was done very well by assistant directors, you know. So yeah.
I mean, so that's
so that apart from anything else, that's to say we really wouldn't have been able to. I don't know how we would have made that film 20 years ago. You know.
Exactly, and there's a drone shot, is there not? During the band rehearsals, the marching rehearsals, or the thing, which is
There are two drone shots.
There's there and back.
There's that we used it then, and we also used it when you see the stagecoach delivering
that's right.
it goes down, it swoops down into, yes.
That's fun. I love it when there's a first. It's like the first crane shot in Topsy Turvy. This is kind of interesting that you're up for all that. Yes, I wondered about the casting. You prioritised. In fact, it's completely Northern actors if they're playing Northern characters.
The Northern characters are all played by Northern actors. I mean, some really good actors would otherwise have been in it, but they're not. You had to be a proper Northern actor. I mean, they did come from both sides of the Pennines. But so there were some Yorkshire people in it as well.
Oh my God.
But no. I mean, I think that was legitimate. Because apart from anything else, obviously there are lots of actors from the northwest and from up north, around and about and in London. But of course, there are quite a lot of the actors who did it were northern-based actors, and out of respect to them, because they don't necessarily get to do movies and things. But they were also brilliant. I mean, there's a fantastic resource of those actors, so it just felt right for that to do it.
And Tilbury aside, what was the extent of the filming that you were able to do in the north? Because all the Moor sequences are actually up there, aren't
Yes.
they? Yeah. And anyway, I have this dim memory of you filming in Lincolnshire for...
Yeah. Lincoln itself and Gainsborough, which is just down the road, play Manchester. There's I don't know if anybody knows Gainsborough, but there is right in the middle of Gainsborough is a large Tudor building, and that was very useful for a number of the locations. And Lincoln also has Tudor buildings, which Manchester did. Even I remember Tudor buildings in the 1950s that are no longer there. So, I mean, like when Hunt arrives in Manchester, it's actually Lincoln, the middle of Lincoln. But, that's just in the nature of filming, really. And,
At what point... I suppose you always knew that Hunt was going to be a central character, and you.
Well, I mean, yes, that's non-negotiable. That is the story,
Yes, the wonderful, wonderful scene between Bamford and Hunt when Hunt is staying in Johnson's house, and he's saying there will be people. Bamford saying there will be people who are going to be armed, and Hunt is saying, it's the big confrontation.
Hunt was profoundly arrogant, and all of that. I mean, which I think we've got, and Rory Kinnear does it brilliantly.
Brilliant.
And grand, and and has no truck with other local yokels, And Bamford was a force to be, to be dealt with, and so the conflict in question, I mean, which I've dramatised. I mean, it did actually was there. I mean, obviously one has pulled it out and heightened it and simplified it and all that. But this all comes from what actually happened, basically.
Yeah, and it's a conflict before the conflict, and it's very...
Yeah, I mean, but, anybody that's been involved or is involved in political activity, there's all kinds of nonsense goes on with committees and, people who egos and all that. That's all it is, and there's nothing old new about that. I mean, or nothing, and that is, it's in the nature of the thing.
And I suppose just before I open it up to everybody, I just wanted to make a comment about the massacre shooting itself. How long did it take, and how did you decide with Dick Pope, the cinematographer, how to approach it?
Well, here's the thing about that. When we were preparing the film, everybody, and I mean by everybody, the producer, the production team, Dick Pope himself, everybody said, for this film, Mike, we have to have an artist who will storyboarding. Now, probably you all know what a storyboard is. If you don't know what a storyboard is, it's a standard device in big movies where every shot is worked out first visually on paper, so that, in other words, the shoot is planned on paper and then to go out and carry it out. Now, we've never shot any of our films like that. What we do always, given the nature of the films that we've made, which we've been looking at here, it's about creating the action and then just looking at it and deciding by looking at it, being with it, where to put the camera and how to shoot it. And there was quite a standoff, and everybody said, no, you really have to think about this, Mike. You have to have a storyboard. And I behaved myself, but in the end I said, look, here's the thing. If you get a storyboard artist, he, or indeed she, will at best wind up in their caravan all the time, and at worst wind up in hospital because I would have broken their legs, basically. And everyone said, well, no. But of course I was right. The only time I can say I was right about anything in life, because that's not how it works with us. And then what we did was, of course, if you look at the whole massacre sequence, it's just a lot of all this stuff going on. But of course, what I did was to work individually with each separate element of actors, and then we pull it together, and then we would run things and look at it and decide what. And we did actually shoot a lot of it with 3 cameras, which is very unusual for us, obviously. But that was a bonus. But we did it by looking at it and being there and, and finding it, really.
And pivotally being in the middle of it.
And being in the middle of it, yeah. Credit has to go. Like Dan Channing Williams, who's a young and brilliant first assistant director, was fantastic. And the production team, the guys that do all that, as a director, you don't just do that yourself. People have to organise it, and it has to be, there's a lot of that stuff. But it was great, and everybody was motivated by, what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Yes, in addition to the drone shots, which were first, stunt riders were also a first for a Mike Leigh film.
I suppose that's true.
Yeah, and one person I really wanted to pay tribute to is Tim Fraser, who was the sound recordist.
An amazing job. I
can't tell you how amazing the job is.
The thing about sound is that, as everybody knows, you record the sound live on the location, and then you edit the sound, and this is for every film I've made except this one. You then do what's called ADR, post-syncing, i.e. the actors come in and re-record in lip sync to the actions that they did. Tim Fraser is a genius, a mad genius, but a genius, and he is. He's recorded every film of mine since Topsy Turvy, and he is. He's an incredible gizmo merchant. He's got van loads of all sorts of stuff. And he had 16 personal microphones, which were on people. This is on the hustings, And, but of course we knew that when it came to it, there would be a massive amount of post-syncing and actors coming back to re-record the voices. The sound editor, another brilliant Mike Leigh Herrick, came and said, well, he said, I've listened to everything that's there, and everything we need is there, recorded on the location. There will be no post-syncing, and there wasn't any, which is for a film with the complexity of this. And it was just because Tim had done this amazing job of capturing everything that everybody said that you needed, and other stuff too, besides, in this obsessive but incredibly thorough and creative way. So.
And it seems to me that it's a classic case of, because it's invisible, that the people who might give the gongs didn't even notice it. To me, it's an outstanding piece of work. Anyway, so much for me. yes, it's time for you to. So I look forward to trying to see your hands in the dark. Yes, on the front row. Hey, great.
Hi. Mike, I was interested in what you said about the ending of the film and your decision to kind of end it in what you called an emotional place. It was a really powerful emotional place. It also felt like quite a political place as well, because it is about the cost of that action to those people. And I suppose for us, thinking about having the franchise, the sense of what that cost other people. So my question is, were you ever aware, making the film, of there being a sort of trade-off in the storytelling between, on the one hand, wanting to show the cost of political action, but on the other hand, not wanting to sort of mute people's desire to take political action now, but do what those brave people did then and encourage a kind of...
Well, I thank you for that question, and I absolutely respect where you're coming from with it, but it's not something that I could in any real manifest way do or take on board. I mean, we tell the story. I mean, obviously, the assumption is that the film will be seen by people other than little green men who live on Mars and who don't know anything about anything to do with anything that's relevant to it. No disrespect to little green men who live on Mars, by the way. So I can't, in any sense, I don't think, account for that. I mean, we share the emotional experience. We tell the facts in their dramatized, heightened way. But you can't, if I understand your question correctly, you can't control or manipulate how people resonate with it in relation to what it's about. I mean, that hopefully looks after itself. Does that make sense?
Yes. Hello.
Thank you. I have two burning questions, and I hope that's okay. For me, there's Gary Yershon's music is fantastic, and it's impeccable, and it's immaculate, and it's really, and it's used beautifully in the film. And but there's one bit of music that I'd love you guys to discuss, and how you discovered it and how you implemented it in the film, and it's the Ruffians March. I'm just wondering how you discovered that, how you then kind of kept it with its brevity, and what made you think that would add, not in a rude way at all, but how do you think it would add to the historical resonance of the film?
The march, when they're marching.
Yeah, the Ruffians March.
It was one of a number of extant pieces of music that we knew was in the air at the time, because the source material to say that. So Jackie Riding, the researcher, and myself gathered these pieces of music, presented it to Mike, and Mike...
Yeah, and we got the band, the guys playing the band. There was one day when because we did the preparation rehearsals in an old British Telecom building by the Westway, on the corner of the Edgware Road. And there was one day when the guys, all the actors playing band people, all could play instruments. They marched around this space. We all sort of marched around with them, really, and they played all these tunes, and it was extraordinary. So that, if I understand the spirit of your question, I mean, this is a kind of living antique element, which it's great to be able to put into the middle of this reconstruction that you're making, which is an actual organic thing from the time, and it has that quality, and it was from then, and it would have been played then. So it's magic, really.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely just a brilliant answer. Thank you again. My second question, if we've got time for it, it's just, I'm sorry. So throughout your films, there's the themes of work, processes, labour, and all the a team both on screen in front of the camera and also behind the camera as well take on such amount of labour and work and research as well. I'm just wondering if you'd be able to highlight any particular cast members or any particular members of the crew that took it on themselves to really go above and beyond when it came to the understanding maybe the character or the period, with maybe particular kind of pointed direction over to like Neil Bell. I just think he's got a fantastic performance and he completely embodies the character brilliantly.
Bamford.
Bamford, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's right.
No, you're just identifying for everybody who you're talking about.
Sorry.
Well, actually, everybody did, really. And what was interesting, I mean, for example, well, this isn't quite what you're asking me, but it is in the territory. As I said earlier, the National Archive at Kew were incredibly helpful. On one day, for example, Jacqueline Riding, our researcher, arranged for us to go to the National Archive. All the actors playing the magistrates and I went. And the guys, I mean, a lot of material had been laid out for us in this room with these guys who were experts on the period from the National Archive, the curators. The actors who were playing actual people had material, like the magistrates all wrote to the Home Office. I mean, at one point, one of them actually in the film writes to the Home Office. His letters to the Home Office, all of them are in the National Archive. So he was able to see the letters written by his character and hold them in his hand. I mean, that's the level of it, really. And it's all there. I mean, there was stuff in the British Library as well, who were also incredibly helpful. So it's that stuff. I mean, that's not necessarily what you're asking me, which is people individually going out and which people did. I mean, people would, on all these films, I mean, people have always, actors come back and say, actually, I was looking into this and I found out something else, and so there was a lot of that went on. But in fact, it was a hive of activity. Just as the other day I was saying that the Tate Britain laid open the Turner collection at the archive, and indeed the Royal Academy was incredibly helpful to actors playing painters to go in there and dig around and all that. So yeah.
Thank you very much for answering the question. It was absolutely fantastic to ask you that.
Oh, I've got my eye on you, sir.
Thank you, Mike. My question is, how did you cast your partner in the film? Your partner was the
how did I cast her?
Yeah, in the end, was the decision influenced by the fact that she plays the Mother Queen in The Crown?
Well, first of all, with all due respects, it's only a marginal factor that she is my partner. She's in the film because she seemed right for her to play the part, just as she played Mrs. Booth in Mr. Turner. But actually, in answer to your even cheekier question, she played the Queen Mother in The Crown after we made this film. So it absolutely did not influence her being cast in the part of at the end of the Prince Regent's mistress.
Sir,
I mean, the bottom line is she's a very good character actress, and that's why she was in it, really.
Yeah, and a very well-known one. Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Finally, I've seen your film. Finally. I was very lucky because there was a cancellation on, I think it was Wednesday, and I couldn't see Happy Go Lucky, so I saw Waterloo. Peterloo.
What is your question?
Mike, we've known each other since 1965, and I have missed your films, I'm afraid, because my career was mainly in theatre, but I'm now doing more films. And I'd like to know how long it took you to actually make the film, because we're making a film at the moment, and it's going to be a short time, I hope. But how actual
How long it took to make it?
How many months and years did it take?
Well, it took a long preparation.
Yes, exactly.
Casting and research and all the rest of it. And we did the preparatory rehearsals for 6 months and shot it, I think, for 16 weeks. And then the post-production was a few months.
This is a good moment for me to ask a question I should have asked but didn't, which is Amazon, who had stumped up the dosh.
Well, when we decided to make the film, we said at the outset, this is very unlikely to happen because there's no way we can make this on a shoestring relative to what we normally do. I mean, the bottom line is we did make it on a shoestring relative to a great number of movies that get made, but not my movies. And my producers went to the Cannes Film Festival to hustle to see if they could find anybody that was interested. And on day one, the first meeting they had was with this guy from Amazon. And they said, Mike Leigh wants to make a film about the Peterloo Massacre. And he said, you're on. We're in. And they put up nearly all the money. Some came from Film 4, and there were a couple of other. But nearly all of it came from... And they were, I have to say, and you know this, they were immaculate. They did not interfere with it. They came over from time to time from the States to just to be around and be helpful, but they never interfered with it. They never interfered with any aspect of it. And in fact, when we'd finished it, and we had a cut to show them, which was running, I think, nearly 20 minutes over its contracted length, Georgina, my producer, and I took it to New York to show it to them. And we were really expecting to be wrapped over the knuckles about the length. And they watched it and they came out and they said, don't touch it, it's fantastic. So they were great. Now, subsequently, they are no longer interested in such things because they were kind of new on the block as independent movies then, but now they've morphed into the same kind of outfit as Netflix, and so you can't get a bean out of them basically.
Which brings me to getting a bean out of people to support your films. How's that been going?
Terrible, absolutely terrible.
Did you present them with a script, Mike?
No, there isn't a script. You know that.
There's never no script for a Mike Leigh film.
No, but it's just the idea.
Yeah, this is a film about Peterloo Massacre.
Thank you.
Tell me about the next film.
Well, we've just literally it's just turned out in the last few days, really. I mean, I think we can make a very, very, very low budget film next year, but not having done anything for 5 years. I've just had the most terrible rejection from people because people, here's the thing. Having done this and Mr. Turner, for example, what I really would love to do or to have done is to work with this on the same kind of scale, but to make a kind of contemporary film, but with a lot of characters and stuff going on, And people just don't want to know, basically, because unless there is a script, and they can be involved with the casting, and they can interfere with it and do all the things that screw up the experience of filmmaking for a lot of filmmakers. They just don't want to know. So I have, unfortunately, hit hard times. And that includes I came up with a scheme, which I don't mind sharing here actually, which was to have a contemporary narrative with quite a lot of characters from different racial and ethnic backgrounds in a story, but that every so often during the story you would cut to a flashback, if that's the right word, of the moment when the antecedents or ancestors or great-grandparents or whatever it was, or parents of the character, a particular character, arrive in the UK. And this will be a whole kaleidoscope of all that going on. And we were trying to pitch that as a movie, and somebody who's very knowledgeable about things said, look, this is, you'd be better off trying to make this as a series of television films. Go to the BBC. I guarantee the BBC will go for it. So we did, and we found a producer at the BBC was very interested. But he said, you have to come and meet the head of content. And there is a woman whose role is the head of content. You're nodding. You know her?
The BBC bureaucracy.
The BBC bureaucracy. And we had the meeting, and then the word came back, no, we can't do it, you know. We just, and we don't know what we're going to we don't trust it. So it never happened. And I have to say that I've had, like everybody in show business, I've had lots of rejections over the years, but that really, really pissed me off, actually. Because the BBC could have done it, and in a way, it would have been great. So I've kind of, as I near my 80th birthday, we're going to make a low-budget film, and I'm sure it'll be as good as we can make it. But I'm kind of starting to give up on the possibility of doing the kind of broader, bigger canvas of this kind in a contemporary context, because I just can't find any backing, you know.
You can't find a risk taker. The kind of risk takers that you worked with at the BBC who said, oh, no script, fine.
Well, of course, that was the BBC 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Half its life ago. It's 100 years today. Today is the 100th anniversary of the BBC. And I did lots of things at the BBC 50 years ago. So anyway, enough of all that. Let's go back to the question.
Question there, up there.
Thanks very much, guys. I was just going to say to both of you, the series is coming to an end tonight. I'd like to ask each of you which was your favourite film, and then which is your favourite one where you've been working together, because obviously, the last two nights has been very inspirational. The films and the music. I'd just like to ask your favourite film.
What's yours?
Series.
Well, I find it very difficult about favourite films. I mean, I really do. I've got two sons, and I love them both, and I really would be hard to say that one of them is my favourite, you know. And in a way, I feel the same about my films, if I may say that, you know. So I don't know. I mean, but your question specifically is about the films since Happy Go Lucky. By the way, Sally Hawkins is in the audience. I think you should give her a round of applause, basically. Since I mentioned Happy Go Lucky, Sally, sorry about that. But I don't know. I mean, he does such a good job, and he thinks I do such a good job, and we just are brilliant. I mean,
I think curiously, the nostalgia quotient for me is largest on Topsy Turvy, because I was on it for so long. It was the first time I'd ever done any film, and I didn't compose a note, but it didn't matter. And it has and I love Gilbert and Sullivan, and it has a particular place in my heart for irreplaceable hysterical rehearsals with people. So that has a particular place. But in terms of the actual collaborations,
I mean, we do have a blast.
We have a very happy time, but then everybody does, as I'm sure Sally would back up. So, but thanks for the question. It's very nice to think about it. Front row here. 2 questions on the front row. Thank you.
I found the film really powerful and extraordinary, and thank you so much for it. I think it's really rare in film to get great performances from the SAs, the extras, and I've heard you talk, Mike, before about how you get how you work with actors in maybe smaller roles who wrong word, but they're not on screen for very long or on set for very long. But I'd be really interested to know how you work with the essays.
Well, it's thank you for the question. I mean, of course, it goes without saying that I don't work with every one of them individually, creating a character. But we were very. I mean, the team whose job was to find the guys, the extras, worked very, very rigorously with various different organisations that supply extras. To make sure we found people that I was in a film in 1962 called Two Left Feet, an awful British film, which when it was released was advertised as with the tagline "London's swinging teenage jungle," and I was one of the swinging teenagers. And this was shot in the autumn of 1962. And we spent, I was playing a minor character, but I spent a lot of time with the extras, basically in lots of sequences where we were twisting again like we did last summer. And that experience, plus I made a film for the BBC, which some of you may have seen, called The Kiss of Death, which we shot in Oldham in 1976. And they still had at that time in the Northwest Wakes Week, which was a week when everybody had a holiday. The factories all closed for a week and people could go to Blackpool and do all that. And we had a sequence in a discotheque, and so the first assistant director organised a whole gang of people, a full complement of people to fill the discotheque with local people who were on their Wakes Week. And because of equity rules, it was agreed that they wouldn't be paid, but they'd all get expenses and free food and drink, and everybody was happy with that. And that didn't break any union rules. And we shot the sequence. But when we looked at the rushes, and you could hear all this wild sound that had been, you kept hearing this voice saying, "I'm a member of Equity, I'm going to complain to the..." And so there was a big fuss. So then it was Equity, the Manchester office of Equity said, "No, this is out of order and you really have to..." And so, fine. Well, then we had a scene in a pub, and all these extras came, official, professional extras who were members and all that. And they were as real as Mickey Mouse. They were all standard, and they all did Coronation Street and things. I mean, they really were. I mean, you put them in the thing and you just didn't believe in any of them, really. So I said, okay, let's just shoot something. And then we said, great, thanks, guys. That's really good. Thank you very much. You've been very helpful and well done and good night and goodbye. And off they all went. And then we got some other people from there and we filmed them. I tell these anecdotes because these experiences defined my attitude to these things without wanting to be a fascist. The other one, of course, which I may already have mentioned here, I can't remember what we said when we screened High Hopes. I think I mentioned this, but when we were researching the scene at Highgate Cemetery where they go and visit Karl Marx's grave in High Hopes, on the two occasions when I went up there, on both occasions, there were people from the Chinese People's Republic who... everybody at that time from the Chinese People's Republic would come to London and they would all go to Highgate Cemetery to pay their respects at Karl Marx's grave. And so I thought, this is great, let's do that. And so I said to the second AD, we need to have Chinese extras. And on two consecutive days when we were in another location, prior to going to to Highgate Cemetery. He said, "Okay, I've got some guys in a minibus for you to meet," and these guys were very nice. They were film extras from a Chinese ethnic background, Londoners, and they'd all worked in restaurants. And one guy actually had a suitcase with a Chu Chin Chow costume in it, which he was prepared to put on for me to see it. Chu Chin Chow was a very famous
Edwardian
racist musical. And I said, it's no use. I mean, this will never work. And indeed, we broke the rules, and we got a bunch of students from London University, all from the People's Republic of China, all who had already been to Highgate Cemetery, because that's what you do. And they all came in their clothes. They all had to wear clothes that they'd bought in the People's Republic of China, and they all knew exactly how to behave, and they were real. All of which, to answer your question, is to say, when it came to filling the Peterloo Massacre with people who really looked and felt like they were in Manchester in 1819, enormous lengths were gone to get people that really looked and sounded like real people. And for the most part, just occasionally, if I look at it scrutinously, I'm not entirely convinced about, but I'd say 95-6% of the people really are feasible. But more important than any of that is that Jacqueline Riding, who did the research, before every sequence, they would be ushered into a marquee, which we had at the back, and she would explain to them in detail, and give them the time and space to do so, what was going on, what the issues were, what their motivation was, who they were, etc., etc. So that what you're looking at is people who really knew what they were acting, and I think that's what you're talking about. Thank you for your question.
Could you pass that along to the gentleman there? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to both of you for this evening. Just to touch on something that's been referred to already about the magistrates. And there's, I think it's 2 nods to the sort of fact that there was one who was a little bit dissenting.
Say it again.
I think there was 2 occasions in the film where there was a nod towards one of the magistrates who was a bit dissenting about how far to go and how harsh they should be. I mean, first of all, was that accurate? And the same, and there's a similar occasion during the massacre where a cavalry soldier from the one regiment upbraids the others and said, "Hang on, this is going a bit far." Again, with that, and why did you include it? Because was it to sort of show that, with everything going on, there was a grounds where people, it wasn't completely unanimous?
Well, I mean, I think I would suggest that in all conflicts, when people are administering heinous things on other people, some people are going to think twice about it and some not. But it did come out of some research, actually, and it just seemed appropriate to happen, but because it's about humanity and, so it just seemed the right thing to do. And it does, as I say, there was evidence in some quarters that it, I mean, there's lots and lots of detail about the massacre, of soldiers rescuing women and stuff, so it felt right to have that going on within the main thrust of the violence, which was horrendous.
I'm going to have to wrap up now. So for anybody who did have any more questions, I'm sorry, perhaps you can meet in the bar afterwards. There are a couple of housekeeping things that I'm very glad to share with you. First of all, thank you very much indeed, especially those who have come to more than one, and to the many of you who were very touched, have supported this throughout 14 screenings and Q&As, but also, even if you were here tonight just for this, thank you very much for being here. We'd like to thank very much the Garden Cinema for running with this project and for giving us all the support that you have and the welcome that you've given Mike and myself. And do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I completely echo all of that. I think it's great because we weren't sure. I certainly wasn't sure that anybody would show up at all, especially as nobody knew that the cinema was here and all that. But the Garden Cinema, who have much congratulation has to go to the very, not only very efficient guys that run it, but the very nice people that run it. They really are a great team, and they've been really supportive. And I have only nothing but praise for them. And of course, they are the cinema is putting itself on the map. And it's great that you're here and we're here, and it's great that we're going now.
So, thank you, and thank you.
And thank you.